Uh, Welcome back, everybody. This is our second presentation today. Let's open with a word of prayer. Holy God, we thank you for your continued watch, care, and goodness towards us as we gather together on your Sabbath day. Give us the blessing that we need, not just the one that we ask for in our ignorance. Breathe upon us, and may we be filled with your Holy Spirit. Welcome back, everybody. In our first presentation, we spoke about the process and the work of creation. And then we spoke about power sharing. And both those questions were related to the subject of equality. So I know that question 2 alluded to, if not spoke directly, the inference was about the tension between hierarchy and equality. So I understand that, and I understand that we didn't address that. So either we can discuss that, or we can move on to the next third part of the question on equality. And that was about radical feminism. So we can either talk about the tension between hierarchy and equality or radical feminism. So if you see your two options. So I need that in English for you. Or who does the English one? You? Okay. Peter said something and I need it in English.
Jo, já jsem chtěl jednu myšlenku, kdybych se k tomu Parminder chtěl vyjádřit. Když jsem poslouchal ty manželské poradce, tak oni hovořili taky o rovnosti.
So when I was listening to some marriage counselors, they spoke about equality.
Mhm.
And they say that there will never be true equality, but people try to achieve it. And if there was equality, the relationship would die. The life exists in trying to keep things equal.
And do you agree with that? Why did you bring that up?
I wanted to ask your opinion because it doesn't really seem correct to me.
It doesn't seem correct to me either. I think it's based upon a misunderstanding or a shallow understanding of equality. And I think it's something that we really have to understand. We might begin by wives saying, you have to do half the cooking or you have to start cleaning. or I'm going to get a job and I'm going to have my own bank account. We'll send the children into nursery and I'm not going to stay at home. We might define equality that way. I'm not saying that isn't a good working definition, but it's very shallow. And when we start thinking that equality means you do exactly the same job, 50-50, I think we begin to misunderstand what equality really means. So there are many answers that you could give to this simple question. How would you define equality in a very short sentence or a very simple way? As you're thinking, I've already suggested, it's not about equal job function. It can start off that way, where the wife says, you will now do half the washing. Or it gets to we tend to start, especially in families, where we see this emphasis on housework. And that's a very easy thing to tackle. So I'm not saying it's wrong not to tackle it or address it, but I don't think that's the essence of equality. But that doesn't mean it's wrong not. It doesn't mean it's wrong to do that. We should balance the work out between family members, the two adults and the two children that we spoke about. But I think equality is more than that. So how do you view equality? How would you define it in a simple way? But a bit more than just saying we do equal amounts of cooking. So let's go with respect. You're suggesting that respect is a working definition of equality. Do we all agree with that? Does anybody disagree with that? Nobody disagrees? Except me? I disagree. I can respect lots of things, but I don't think it means that I have a sense of equality. You go back to a patriarchal model. The dad rules the house. The wife is the slave. if we're using obviously ugly language, and the children are rude at the dinner table, and they say, well, I'm not eating this rubbish. And the dad will come, pull their ear, slap them on the back of the head, and they'll say, respect your mother. She spent all the time cooking that food. Eat it. So I don't think that's a fanciful model that I've said. I think it's real life. And the husband says, respect your mother. So I'm not persuaded that respect is a good definition of equality. Any thoughts? Mina?
They have the same value.
Oh, we're going to go with respect. I thought you were going to answer about respect. Okay, so about respect? I don't want to move on yet. I just want to make sure that we're all okay about respect. So you can speak and then.
Described doesn't sound like a respect to me.
You may not think it's respectful, but in a patriarchal family model, it's very respectful. The father says to the children, speak to your mother correctly. And in the bedroom, he will force himself upon the wife. So I'm saying we could put a good spin on respect, but respect can mean very different things. And all these conservative marriages, maybe you're one, or maybe as it used to be, they'd all follow the Bible verse. One person has to love, one person has to respect. And the husbands aren't allowed to be abusive to their wives. So I think respect can be understood very differently. That's why I thought it wasn't a good working model for equality. Monica?
I just wanted to say that I don't think that respect is definition. I think in equality it has to be there.
So you can have, if you have equality, do you have to have respect? I think that's what you've said. I would agree. But I could have slavery and still respect. That was the only point I wanted to make. So I think I wanted to get a better working definition of how we understand equality. Not higher or lower. So I'm not sure what that means. Higher or lower. How do you define what is high and what is low? How do you define that? How much money you've got? the importance of your job, how strong you are, aggression. How do you define not higher or lower? Because I agree that that would be that's a mathematical definition of equal, of course. So we can't argue against that. That is the definition of equality. But I just want to understand what that means. So I'm going to put a no for that one, and I'm going to put a yes for this one. But I want us to explain what that means. What does higher and lower mean? Okay, Aileen?
Both persons have the same rights.
Okay, any thoughts? Anybody wants to add something?
Same duties.
So the same duties. So if I decide to stay at home because my has a really good job, and we do the maths, they earn 70,000 euros, and I earn 20. And our family dynamic says that someone has to either spend all the time at home or some of the time. What would you do then? Would you say 70 plus 20 divided by 2 is 45? So partner 1 only works half time and partner 2 works half time. Equal duties. And now your income for the family is 45. But if partner 2 stays at home, partner 1 works full time, your income is 70,000, which is a lot more. What would you do? Which model would you choose?
It's not such an easy question. There are circumstances around it.
Tell me the complexities. Why is it not? The maths is easy. So now you're saying we have to go beyond money. We have to look at some other metric. Because the money tells you work, stay at home. And so you're saying that's not sufficient. So you tell me, why is it complicated?
Can I respond?
No, you translate. For those who are watching, this becomes personal. And we knew that before we began.
So while the man is at work,
Didn't say the man.
that's what he said.
Okay, but I didn't. Well, let's say the partner.
So while one partner is at work, the other partner is at home, and the other partner has other things that they have to do. So they are busy with those other things.
I didn't understand what that meant. One
Um,
partner goes to work, one partner stays at home.
Stays at home, has different things to do than the partner at work.
Okay.
Mhm.
And what does that mean? This person works at McDonald's, and that's an accountant. So I'm talking about their earning potential if they both went to work. They've got a higher qualification than this person. So that's where I got the numbers from.
The way I understood what you wrote there is that those 20, that's counted for the work that is done at home.
No, I didn't mean that. Because 20,000, if you stay at home, you get zero. You don't get 20,000. We live in a world that the government doesn't pay you to stay at home, which many feminists disagree with. But that's a different question. In the world we currently live, they don't. If you wanted to do things in a different way in your family, work, stay at home, this person would earn in their final income would be what? So they want to do it properly. 35. And this one would earn 35 because they'd give half their salary to the person who stays at home. So they could do that. So they're both earning 35,000. So financially, this person's better off to stay at home. So tell me what the complexity is besides the numbers. Because you said different duties. They work in an office and they work at McDonald's cleaning toilets. Very different duties. You have to translate? You just translate anyway. It's for us to all decide if he understands. I'll help him to understand.
There are aspects. It depends if they work part-time or full-time, or if they work during the day or during the night.
We won't worry about all those details. We'll keep a simple model. It's all full-time. It's 5 days a week, 40 hours a week, day shift. So it's all identical. So we can take all those complexities out. Why is it a good idea, or why is it a bad idea for both of them to work and earn less money as a family? It's a big difference. If you've got no more thoughts, we'll move on. You're smiling. Did you want to say something? Why are you smiling for? Your face says don't move on, and your voice says move on.
Saying let's move on.
Okay. Anybody have any more thoughts? I want a good definition for equality. Respect, I don't agree with. Not higher or lower is a mathematical one. Then we spoke about duties, I think. So I gave a mathematical model. Who would go for this option? Your family earns 45,000 euros. Okay, let's leave that. Let's move on. Let's move on. I don't want to get bogged down. Give me a definition for equality.
I wanted to talk about respect because you were describing it from one side. But I think if there's respect from both sides, then it is equality.
So Sarah will call her husband Lord. That's respectful, but it's very patriarchal. So just because we use the word respect, it's how we contextualize it. Slaves have to respect their masters. And if you're a good master, you're quite respectful to your slaves. One of the things that we have found difficult to fight against is this positive conservative idea of family structures. That all these good Christian men say, we don't abuse our wives. We're just head of the house. And we're very respectful in that because it's the job that God gave us to do. And the wives are all happy because they feel respected and valued and they respect their husbands. Tamina had a question. Or a comment, I don't know.
Are you done with the
Yep.
math?
Give us a definition.
I think the same value is important. And I think when you have the same value or you give the other person the same value, you can then respect becomes proper or
Not worried about respect.
okay.
Same value, you're going to say leads to equality. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
So that's a working definition of equality.
Yeah.
If I said describe equality, you say same value. Okay, so I'm going to ask, what does value mean? I know what same means. What do you mean by value? Things have the same value.
The same worth.
Okay, I don't want another synonym. Give you an example. There's a construction company. They have workers. And one of the workers is a laborer. No, I won't call it laborer. One that they've got different workers. Worker 1 and worker 2. And worker 1 is skilled. And the worker 2 is unskilled. Okay with that, Tamina? Are they of equal value to the company?
No,
They're not of equal value.
probably not.
So that company, by your definition, has 2 workers and they're not treated equally because they have different value. You pay this one 15 euros. You pay this one 10 euros. So this one has 50% more value than that one. So tell me how same value leads to equality in this model. So now you've got to define what you mean by value. Because this value, I think you agree this is value, leads to what?
Payment, money,
Leads to,
inequality.
so this leads to inequality. So this is a problem when we use words like respect or value. We have to make sure that we're using it in a way that actually has equality. So I'm not saying you defined it that way when you said it, but I've given you a really simple example where value leads to inequality. Who thinks here a doctor should receive the same salary than someone who sweeps the street? Does anybody think they should receive the same salary? Nobody puts their hand up. Why? A doctor's more valuable than someone who cleans the street? Aren't they both parents or children? Don't they all have the same worth? So when we talk about value, we have to really be careful how we conceptualize that. Okay, anyone else? I'm going to put a cross for this one. The crosses don't mean that they're wrong. It means that they're not good definitions, I don't think. Because they're open to misinterpretation. Husband comes home from work and he just eats the food, doesn't talk to the wife, doesn't listen to her. She says, "You don't value me." He says, "The food's lovely." Because that's how he wants to define value. The wife's an accomplished chef. And as long as she keeps quiet and stops complaining, everything's good. Who wouldn't value that? Or the wife says, I talk to you and you don't listen. And what does the husband say? He repeats exactly what the wife said 2 minutes ago. He says, see, I listen to everything. And you say, Deniska, when that happens? Yes. It's not the words that go in. It's not having a good memory. It's just you're not paying me attention and really understanding and listening to my needs. So I had to put a cross against value. So I'm going to go with this one. Same rights. I think that's a really simple and good definition for equality. As I've thought about it, I think it covers, if not every circumstance that I can think of, at least most of them. I haven't thought of one that it doesn't work. The equality is about having same rights. And I want to add one bit to that. The same rights. Who wants to finish the sentence? Value. How do we define value? How do we define what value is or what respect is? Okay, so I'll answer the question. Maybe it's a bit difficult. When we talk about respect or value, it often comes based upon my thoughts or my understanding. So what I want to add, it's the same rights under the law. So to have equality, we have to have a law, and the way that law is both framed and understood, means the way it's written, framed, and then understood would mean interpreted. And we're all keeping up with the US political system. And we know that this idea of how the law is framed and how it's interpreted is what's happening right before our eyes. So one of the things that goes wrong with equality is that it's not, we're talking about law, it's not, the laws are not framed very well. They're not written well. And if they're not written well, two people can come to the law and do what?
Interpret the
Exactly. That's what we're seeing at the moment all across the world. You need to have laws that can't have multiple interpretations. Is that possible? No, it is not possible. You can't do it. So then what it requires, after you've done the best job that you can do, so that means the laws have to be created in a fair and honest way. And most of them aren't done that way. But once that's done, then you have to have two people who are willing to look at the law in a certain way. Maybe we would call it a reasonable way. So I like this definition. We have the same rights. I haven't defined what rights is. I think most of us know what that means. Under the law. What amendment number is that? Could be a couple of them, but what number would you go for? Under the American system. We've got 14. Any other options?
The right for happiness.
Number. What amendment number is it? Under the American legal system. Okay, I'm going to go for 14. And what's that 14th Amendment connected to historically? Slavery. So you're coming out of a system that is unequal, black and white, that promises equality, and to first promise equality and then deliver upon equality, what do you have to offer people? What do you have to give them? What is either tell me from the 14th, a summary, or just the words? So I'll repeat, you come out of slavery, which is inequality. You're going to offer equality, and to offer equality in a meaningful, genuine way, what do you have to give people?
Citizenship. That's
Citizenship, laws,
uh, the right to life, liberty, and happiness.
okay? So I'm going to summarize all of them. You've got two people before they were unequal. They were unequal in whose eyes? In the eyes of the law. So the 14th Amendment is going to redress this issue based upon what we just heard a second ago. You want to finish it? When the law looks at them, the law has to treat them the same. So now, under the law, as you just said, they're the same. So that's why they had to tackle citizenship. Because somewhere else, it says the law only applies to whom? Americans. American law only applies to Americans. And the slaves were what? American. The only way you can do that is when the law looks at them, not the white person, not the man, not the parent, all those people in power. It's not how they view you. It's how the law views you. And that's the change that happened. And I think we all understand that. So I want to suggest it's not how much I respect my pet or how much value I give to my children's education. Equality is how the law looks at us, not how we look upon one another. Because too many men think they're nice, that they treat women well. And too many women think that men treat them well. Too many of them think that. And so when we start thinking or worrying how we all look at each other, I don't think we can really understand and practice equality. It has to be under the law. The law has to be written well. And then we said what? Under the interpretation bit. What do we say about that?
Zkus mi to jinak povedať.
So we lost connection for a moment. And the last point we were speaking about, you have to be under the law. So it's in the eyes of the law where you can find equality, not in the eyes of another human being. That means that the law we said two things. We said framed. And what does framed mean? Constructed?
Worded.
Written. Is that what you said? Written? Worded, yes. So I'm going to put written. And then the other thing we said? Interpreted. Good. And another thing for interpreted? Understood. Okay, so when we just finished, we said everything has to be written well. So that means a group of people have to come together and make sure the words are good. And then when it comes to the interpretation, what does that require? We're just recapping what we said about 30 minutes again. Rules? When you say rules, what do you mean by, I don't mean define what rules are, I understand that. What do you mean by rules?
Like methodology system by which you interpret the.
So let's walk through this together. Before we go on to what, tell me who.
The judges.
So we'll say two. The two parties. So the two parties have to do what?
Interpret the law. Is that what you mean?
So the two parties have to interpret the law. But you said, you used two words. You said methodology and you said
Rules.
rules. So two parties have to what?
Use methodology.
So two parties have to use methodology, but there's a word missing. We're at the Supreme Court yesterday, today, and tomorrow. And all 9 judges are using what? They're all using
Methodology.
methodology and rules.
They have to.
So there's a problem. So two parties have to do what? Have to use the same rules or methodology. Okay with that? If we don't have all of these components in place, we'll never get equality. Okay, so now we're a couple. No, not a couple. We're parent and child. We always do couples all the time. Should parents and children be equal? Put your hands up if this yes. What was that?
Do you mean that?
So I knew someone was going to say that. I knew someone was going to say that. Because we've already answered that question. I'm not asking you to respect your child. I'm not asking your child to find value in the parent. They're not good definitions for equality. Equality is about rights. So we already know that. So the question is, parents and child, are they equal? Yes, they have to be. Because what does equality mean? They have the same,
Oh.
they have the same rights. So now we could argue about what those rights are. But when we talk about the same rights under the law, go to 14, it doesn't say everybody earns the same money. So when we talk about rights under the law, if we just borrow from 14, it helps to define what those rights are that we're speaking about. It's all very legalistic, which makes it useful to understand. Can a 14-year-old child take their belt off, got a belt, and whip it around their mother's back? Because the mother burnt the food. You'd all say that's a horror story. How could it be so evil? I'm not saying today, but yesterday, you were all comfortable, all means generally. The other way round. In fact, you saw it as your duty, your moral obligation to take your belt off and do the same thing to your child. Especially if they were your son. I don't know if you got any comments on that. When we start trying to understand what rights are, I don't think it's that difficult to define what rights are. How would we define them as Christians? Another simple definition.
Golden rule.
Golden rule. I was going to give an English little saying, but sometimes it doesn't work and it might sound funny. I'll give it anyway. Do we all know what a goose is? As the bird, a goose. In English, the male is called a gander. You have the goose and the gander. They've got. So what they used to say is what's good for the goose is good for the gander. If the men can do flirting or some bad behavior, the women can do the same. So it's bad behavior, bad example, where you see the principle. What's good for me must be good for you. So I want us to see in really simple terms what all the equality thing is about. At least how I view it. It's not all of these concepts. It's about the law. Everybody has the same rights under the law. The law treats everybody equally. And then when we look at law, we see how it's written and how it's understood. And this is where the difficulty comes. Who writes the law and all of their prejudices? And how then we understand the law? And so it's not unsurmountable, which means we can overcome it. This is where our problem lies. And this is why we get back to this idea of respect and value. Because I think we'll find that those ideas are buried in this problem. The problem of having two parties applying the rules in the same way. Our problem is, as feminists, if you want to use that term, let's go with the law or the framing of the law. What's our problem here?
I can take Constitution as an example. It was imperfect document because those who were creating it already had their own opinions and prejudices.
Okay, so we'll take two things from that. Our big problem is that the laws have already been written, and there's no way we're going to get new laws anytime soon. So that's our big problem. Number one, the laws are already there, and we can't change them. And then, as it says here, the way they were written were not very good. They weren't written well. We might say they weren't written fairly. Or as you said, they were compromised. So we've got two issues is they're already existing and they're not very good. The idea behind them is good. And that's where we get to the problem. And so now we have this interpretation or understanding. And we find that the two parties are not looking at those laws in the same way. So I don't know what the terms that you're familiar with. When it comes to the arguments that are used, we'll go with the Supreme Court. Party one uses what rule? Originalism. And the other one uses? So this one's harder because we don't use a word for that one, I've noticed. Okay, I'll go with progressive. I like that. I don't even know what socialists mean, so I'm not going to do that one. Progressive expresses the thought. What does original mean?
There's It's the interpretation from that age.
Yes,
Mhm.
it means that we look at the document today in a framework in which it was written. And progressive means what?
The document in the present time.
Yes, we look at the document now, the law, in a different way. We look at it in today's context. And the problem is, one of the parties, the originalists, say, you can't just change it. If you want to change the interpretation, you should change the words. Which means you have to have a new law. So that's why we have this cycle. And it's at the Supreme Court, in Congress, in your government, and in your families. It's everywhere in society. The same repeating pattern or problem. So if you're having problems in your marriage, or you're having problems with your children, or your children are having problems with you, it's all about what? So it's all about the law to begin with. It's about which laws you're going to use. 1, 14, 21. We pick and choose the laws that we like, which is bad. And then how we interpret those laws. And if the two parties, the parent and the child, the two friends, the ministry leader and the member, if they're not looking at the same law, or if they're understanding the law differently, you will never get equality. And I think that's what the problem is. It's not how much we respect. I respect all the members. Doesn't mean that they feel that there's equality. Equality has to be built upon law. And I think we don't really conceptualize, and maybe we don't even agree that that's the case. Okay, so any comments?
I said already.
Which was what? Okay, you can. Sorry.
Look at the other person with our imperfect eyes. God's way of looking at things. We don't have the correct standards with which we measure things with.
Okay, carry on.
A to znamená, že my se soustředíme na toho člověka, místo abychom se soustředili na to pochopení toho zákona, toho měřítka. Je to tak správně?
Do I understand correctly that we make a mistake when we focus upon the other person instead of trying to understand the law or the measurement?
Že nemá smysl pořád těma starýma očima se na prostě ponořovat do toho vztahu.
That it doesn't make sense to look or to try to go deep into the relationship with our old way of looking at things.
Why did you say God?
Zákon, ty opravdové oči, vlastně to je ten boží zákon.
Because the law, the real eyes, the good side is God's way of looking at things. That's God's law.
You don't think we could frame some good laws?
And come closer to it.
I didn't ask that. I said, do you think we could frame some good laws? Without looking, if you like.
And
So he said, so Peter said that we have to look at God's law. I asked, why are you using the word God? And then he said, the better we understand God's law, the better off we will be. My question is, can't we frame laws without God? So clearly Peter at the moment thinks we can't.
write them, but to really understand, that's a journey.
If I gave you a choice, which system you want to live under, would you want to live under the Jewish system or the Roman system? Yeah, that was my question.
Want any of them?
You don't want the Jewish system, which is a theocracy from God. You don't want to live under God's system, and you don't want to live under Rome's system.
And it as a theocracy, I would want that.
So you prefer to live under God's laws, not Roman laws. Yep. So if I ask a different question, would you prefer to live under the Ten Commandments or the Universal Declaration of Human Rights? Which one would you like to live under? Because this is Israel and this is Rome. You said before it was Israel when I said it in a general term. Now I'm talking about human rights, which I hope that you've all read. Ten Commandments, which I hope you've all read. And you have to look at the words, remember? Which one would you want to live under?
My understanding is that the human rights are interpretation of the Ten Commandments.
So which one would you go for then? You're going to say Ten Commandments. You prefer to live under Ten Commandments. Yep. Which one would you prefer to live under? Mm-hmm.
The second one, because that's a document that develops in time.
Monica? Just give me answer, one or two. Yeah.
Two.
Two? Two? You don't know? Under 2, you can eat what you want, dress what you want. 2? Easy one. Aileen? Thomas? 2? You said number 1? 1 and 2? 2? 1? It's cluster? 1 or 2? Do you not understand the question or? Could you explain it if you understand it?
Teda v Izraeli, alebo v systéme, kde platia univerzálne ľudské práva, čiže v Ríme.
Which one? Number 2. Okay. You can't change Aileen. You made your bed. To lie in it. 2 answers? No? 2? Not sure? You? 2. So I knew it was going to be 2. You can keep your phone then. Okay. So why is 2 winning out? It's liberal. What does that mean, liberal? Does that mean out of control or does that mean more fair? Which one do you when you use the word liberal? I don't know what that means.
Positive.
Positive. So you'd prefer to live under a less positive system.
Correct interpretation.
Within, so you have to interpret it. Okay. Anyone else? Number 1, you prefer? Why?
Want to live in God's in God's kingdom under his laws, in the God's laws.
So
The other one to be without God.
so everyone who lives under these rules of number 2, they can't get to heaven.
Saying that? I didn't say that.
I need to. I didn't say that.
If you follow rule number 2, can you get to heaven?
I'm not saying who will be saved or not be saved. That's not up to me. It's up to God.
If you break the 10 commandments, can you go to heaven? Okay, so you know that. If you break number 2, can you go to heaven? So if you keep number 1, you go to heaven.
Sure.
If you break it, it's sure. If you keep it, you're not sure.
When I keep 10 commandments, I should be saved.
That he's saying, keep commandments, you're saved. Yes? Yeah. Keep the commandments, you go to heaven. What about if you follow number 2? Can you go to heaven with number 2?
One and still reject God.
Which bits of God are you going to reject by number 2?
That God is the creator of these laws.
So if I say, I don't think God created it, I think lightning created it. Or Zeus. I can't get to heaven. Or Allah. Allah did all the work. I can't go to heaven now. I'll help you because you know that's not right. We'll go to Romans chapter 1.
It's not about how I call that being, but who that being is, what their character is.
So if I say it's the universe, which has got a good character, I could go to heaven then. Just translate what you want to interpret.
Universe is something different to God. There is sin in universe.
I understand you think it's different. My question is, if you don't have a belief in God, or you worship a tree, which is all full of sin, you can't go to heaven. Because I think Paul says in Romans 1, you can. You can worship rocks, trees, a giraffe, and go to heaven.
I already said that I'm not going to judge who is going and not going to heaven. This is up to God, and that's what they decide.
Sure, but if you don't judge yourself, you get into trouble. The Bible says you're required to judge yourself. I'll move forward.
The person himself.
No, you have to judge yourself. You have to determine whether you're in the faith.
I judged myself by saying when I said I want to keep 10 commandments, I gave that judgment.
Okay, that's fine. Tamina, you said you want to live under rule number 10. Sorry, 10 commandments. Not the universal ones. What's the difference between the two?
In one, I can defend myself, and the other one, I have to suffer or give the other cheek.
Tom prvou sa môžem brániť a pri tom druhom sa musím trpieť alebo musím nastaviť to druhé líce.
What does this word mean?
Slovo.
Universal?
Universal. And what does this word mean?
Right.
So number two, universal means everybody, gives everybody rights. And the Ten Commandments says,
Right.
there's many problems with it, but no man, no other man can look at my wife except me. And they can't look at my car and my house because all three are my possessions. And you'd rather live under that rule that doesn't afford universal rights. I find that interesting.
It was about self-defense, so maybe I went from a different premise where you actually speak at the moment.
Ja som bola sebaobrane, že vychádzala som z inej premisy alebo z iného predpokladu.
I bet you both afford self-defense.
Because when we talked about it in France, we said, yeah, with the other one, with Rome, you actually suffer. There's no defense.
Predtým, tak vlastne pod tým druhým systémom rímským vlastne trpíte. Je tam tá sebaobrana? Môžete sa brániť.
At a previous presentation, when I said we're not supposed, the issue about turning the cheek or resistance against the government is a political phenomena, and you'd see the same dynamic in Israel. You're not allowed to resist that government either. God said to you, do this thing. You can't resist God. So there's no self-defense in number one. And if Caesar says do the thing, depending what the thing is, of course, you can't resist that either. So in that context, neither of them offer you self-defense. Mina wants to change. Okay. And Alien will take your place. So I'll put it back. Okay, we've run out of time. I want to thank everybody. Hopefully we've had some interesting thoughts about equality and how to understand it better. And the main thing I want to bring across to us, whilst there is a level of subjectivity, because we write differently and we understand differently, if we all try to approach the issue of law in an unbiased fashion as much as we can, and we use the same rules as much as we can, we would get far closer to equality. And one of the things about equality, it's very difficult to enforce or to force people to do that. And I think it's more about our rights, it's about the golden rule, than it is about job function. how much money we earn, what our jobs are, how we dress, what we eat. It's all about how we treat people and how we expect them to treat us. Under a framework of law. Let's pray. Holy God, we thank you that not only we can be equal with one another, that we're able and required to see each other as valuable. Because we see ourselves as being valuable. That we can respect others because we respect ourselves. But more than all of those things, you have given us the privilege of being equal with you. In Jesus' name, amen.